And I'll pass it to you, Carol.
Thank you. So I have given testimony a lot for the past 6 years, both in Montgomery County and in the House and Senate in Annapolis. And one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had as a JUFJ member was testifying in Annapolis for a bill to reform and expedite the payment of compensation for those wrongfully convicted and imprisoned in Maryland. There I was in my JUFJ t-shirt, surrounded by 4 exonerated men who had spent years in prison for crimes they didn't commit. They told their personal stories, and then I testified using my Jewish values and my convictions to explain the importance of passing this law. Here's a little excerpt from my testimony. The Jewish text that shapes my religious and moral conviction that Maryland's law should automatically give fair compensation for anyone wrongfully convicted and imprisoned is from Genesis chapter 1, where we learn that humans are created in God's image, B'Tselem Elohim. We all contain the divine spark. We all deserve to be treated with respect and dignity. This applies to all people, whether they've been incarcerated or not. Preventing and punishing criminal conduct are among the primary obligations of government at all levels. But it is also the obligation of the government to ensure that no one is unjustly accused, convicted, or punished. When we are working to reform our criminal justice system, we must demand that it operates in accordance with these deeply held Jewish beliefs.
Thank you, Carol. So what are we going to do tonight? We're going to begin by talking about sort of like the abstract, the why of testimony. Why is it something that JUFJ does? Why is it important? And how to approach it? What makes for impactful testimony? From there, we'll be shifting gears a little bit and going into an overview of the testimony writing and submission process. And I want to emphasize that this is an overview. We aren't going to be going into all of the nitty-gritty details of like every single tech piece along the way. And this is something you'll hear Carol and I say often tonight. You will have plenty of support from JUFJ staff, from folks that are really experienced with testimony at all of these steps along the way. And we'll give you resources to support you in both writing testimony and to help you with the tech pieces. And we'll share some of those tonight. And I'll just say, it's really exciting, I think, for me, when we were doing our rounds, to hear that we have such a wealth of experience in the room and such a breadth of experience from folks that are maybe just dipping into testimony for the first time to folks that are really, really experienced. So please, in the chat, feel free to be asking questions for folks that have experience with testimony, to be sharing your wisdom. I'm really excited about this training and really excited about testimony and really excited for us to be surfacing questions and learnings together. So starting again with like the importance of testimony, why is it something that we do? So submitting testimony to the Maryland General Assembly is a really powerful piece of the advocacy work of JUFJ. Hearing the stories and personal narratives of community members is an important component of moving elected officials to take action on the issues that JUFJ and our partners care about. And this training in particular is going to focus on written testimony. In the past, our coalition partners have asked us to give oral testimony for some bills, but not all of them. Often the best strategy is to ensure that the people who are most impacted by these issues are the ones giving oral testimony, which means that JUFJ, we are not normally the primary group of people impacted by the issues that we work on. So we give a more limited amount of oral testimony. And at the same time, we want to, and we've been asked to submit as much written testimony as possible. So we'll talk more about this later, but JUFJ submits one piece of organizational written testimony, and then all of the rest of the testimony is coming from you as individual constituents. And this helps us make a case for why legislators should care about the issues when they receive a substantial amount of testimony from the people that they are accountable to. There are no guaranteed votes in support of our issues in the General Assembly, right? We need testimony from everyone, whether you live in Montgomery County, Frederick, Baltimore, Anne Arundel County, Howard County. A vote is a vote is a vote, and every piece of testimony is really, really important. So like I said earlier, please feel free to put questions in the chat as we go through the materials. And I'll be staying on after this training to answer any questions about some of the online tools that we're surfacing. And another thing I just want to say really clearly from the front that we'll be touching on a couple of times as we go throughout this training tonight is that not one person on this call needs to be an expert, right? If you do have professional or lived experience expertise on these issues, that is great, that is valued, that is really important. But our power comes from being constituents and from caring about these issues and being able to share why you care about them from a personal point of view. So when we're thinking about testimony, there's no threshold of like particular like policy expertise in order to be able to give testimony in a really like moving, compelling way. So I am going to share on the screen a little infogram from last year. So last year, we submitted almost 170 pieces of testimony, which doubled the amount that we submitted in the previous year. And this was really exciting. For those of you that have submitted testimony with JUFJ before, thank you for contributing to that incredible number. So many people have stretched themselves to write testimony for the first time, or the second time, or the third time. And it's made a big impact on our power and our effectiveness in Annapolis. So we're really glad that you're here, and we look forward to doing all we can to support you in writing your testimony, whether it's your first time or whether it's something that you're feeling very, very familiar with. So I'm going to go back to our slides, and if someone can give me a thumbs up that you are seeing it on the screen. Great, thank you, Ruth Ann. Thank you, Carol. And Carol, I will pass it back to you.
Okay, so just to underline one thing that was said before, we don't expect anybody here to be an expert. Trust me, they will have all of the expert testimony on every bill. And we are not we are not experts. We are bringing ourselves as a constituent and our values and why we care. The most effective written testimony is concise, specific, and personal. Personal is a key. Just one single-spaced page, clearly identifying your support or opposition. We actually do oppose bills occasionally. Share why this matters to you. Pick 1 to 3 arguments and make them well, and make an emotional impact. As you prepare your testimony, think about these kind of questions. What Jewish or other values shape your views on this issue? And if you don't know any Jewish values, what's one of the things that we can help you with, and the tools will help you with. For every single issue, we've done some research on some of the key Jewish values and texts that speak to that issue. Do you have a professional connection or related experience on this issue? And the good news is we often do have experts that testify on bills and bring both their Jewish values and their expertise. And that's even more terrific, and that's fine, but it's not necessary. What personal story illustrates your connection to the issue? And we often do have people who have absolutely personal experience with the issue, and that's even better. So tell that story. And why do you support or oppose that bill? So personal stories are really important. They appeal to the emotion, and emotion is something that sticks with the reader more than facts and figures. You don't have to give any statistics. Trust me, they're going to have all the experts and all the statistics that these legislators can possibly stand. What we are bringing is our Jewish values and our personal stories as a constituent that votes for these legislators. And Eliana's going to share one specific story, and I'm not going to go through it, but you're going to get a copy of this. And it's by Scott Snyder, who was testifying about an immigration bill. And his family story was absolutely perfect. And he had a grandmother who happened to be an illegal immigrant as a Jew. And he had a great story to tell. And so that's the kind of story that perhaps you might have. It doesn't necessarily be exactly the same story, but whatever the story is, if you have one that connects to the bill, that's great. You don't need a story. You can, again, come with your values and why you care about that bill. Remember that you have power as a constituent. You are someone who cares about this issue, whatever the issue is. As a non-expert, the everyday experience of a constituent is where your authority, your power lies. An example, again, of a story from someone, a JUFJ or Claire Landers, is something that you will see, and you'll get a link. It's on the website. Claire lives in Baltimore in a community where there was a lot of police engagement with people who lived there. And she was writing from her personal experience about how we needed to change the laws with regard to the way the police engage in her community. Again, that was a personal story about someone living in a community as a constituent that needed and wanted to see the laws changed. So let's talk a little bit about what the process is like. And we aren't going to go into detail tonight about the specific technical pieces, but our JUFJ website is loaded with exactly what you need to do and how you need to upload and how and what are the formats, and we give you templates, so you'll have as much as you need, but we're not going to go into the exact details tonight. So session is starting soon, next week. And that means hearings are going to follow. So you need to think about writing as soon as you can. And you don't want to wait to the hearing date. You got to get it in before. And you don't need to know the bill number or the details to start writing. All you need to know is your story, your issue, and what is the issue you care about. And we're going to show you that there are issue sheets with all of the exact issues that we're working on. And we don't have the bill numbers yet, but that will come.
And before we keep going, I just want to add really quickly, when we say story, we don't mean necessarily like a big dramatic moment in your life. We mean your personal connection to this issue. Why are you spending your time writing testimonies? Why is this something that you care about? And that can be really powerful to convey to your legislators. I'll also just say, if you're sitting there feeling like, I don't have a story, I don't know what I would write, staff and many JUFJers that are experienced with testimony are more than willing to help you think that through. So if you're feeling stuck on the story piece, please don't let that be a barrier to you writing testimony. There are a ton of resources and a ton of people within the JUFJ community that can help you think through, like, what would you want to say? What feels resonant to you to include in your testimony? Carol, I'll pass it back to you.
Okay. So the very first thing you do is you're going to fill out the testimony interest form, and Eliana's going to put it in the chat. Now, this form is critical because it is how we know when to contact you about a bill number, the hearing dates, the testimony submission deadlines. And on the form, you're going to let us know which issue you want to write about. And they're all listed there, the broad issues that we're working on. And on the form, you're going to let us know if you want to work with a testimony mentor. And this is a person like me, I volunteer every year, who can help you craft a story if you have one, help you with all the technical aspects of the forms and the submission process. And really, filling out the form doesn't obligate you to write testimony, but it's really helpful for you to fill out the form so we know who might be interested and how we can help you. And I strongly urge you that if you've never done this before, check off the box for a mentor, because that will be your buddy to get you through that first piece of testimony. And you'll feel so much better because you'll have someone who you can bounce your drafts off and work through it with you. So it's in the chat, and hopefully you will take a look at it and fill it out. It doesn't have to be done this second. So when you start writing, you have templates to use in the testimony guide. This is all out on the JUFJ website, by the way. The templates will help you format your testimony correctly, because there is a very specific format that it's actually required by the legislature. They need to know what the name of the bill is, and it provides an outline for how to structure the exact. Remember, you're only getting one page, and what information in each paragraph you want to cover. And personally, I've been told by my legislators, Carol, we probably only read the first paragraph. So that's a tip, right? You got to make it powerful. We have some bills that have a stack of 100 letters that we have been shown by legislators that have come in either for or against a bill. So they're only going to look at that first paragraph. So that's an important, powerful tip that we use. So these testimony templates are fully customizable, and you can type directly onto them. So it will help you get the exact testimony format that you need, because again, we upload these electronically right onto the date of the website of the legislature. So some things to highlight. We know details for many of our bills, and you can find the important information in our issue one-pager document, and you will get a link to that. So for each issue, you will get a one-pager. By next week, we'll also have testimony talking points, which will be even more specific about the bills. We will have more information as soon as we know what the bills are, because the bills we don't have access to the bills yet. For bills where we don't know bill numbers or other details, it isn't too early to start writing testimony, because you know the issue. You can write about your story if you have one, your values right now, because you know how you feel about this issue. And then all you need to do is add the rest of the information when the time comes. We will be emailing everyone who has signed up to write about a specific issue when we get the hearing date. So that's why it's important to fill out that interest form. And that email will include the key details you need to know to finalize your testimony. The top of each of one of our pages will have the bill number and the name of the bill and who submitted the bill. So that's the information that we will relay to you so that you could complete your page. JUFJ will not be editing each individual piece of testimony, but there are many experienced JUFJ leaders who are available to review and offer suggestions. On the interest form, as I mentioned, if you indicate you want a testimony mentor, they can do this and review it and review your drafts and help you make sure that your first piece of testimony is exactly what you want it to be, and help you brainstorm about how to write it. So there are lots of resources, as I mentioned, and the JFJ website will be updated. Right now, the issue 1 pages are out there. So for every issue that we are going to be working on, there's a 1 pager that will give you all the key information. And I think Eliana may actually be pulling up one as we speak. The website also has lots of examples of testimony. So every year, that's the issue 1 pager, and you can scroll down and see that it has all the information that you can grab and use about that issue. Specifically, there are multiple issues, multiple bills under each issue type, and so you can choose which one you're interested in writing about. So the website also has examples of testimony. So every year we have something called Testimony Tuesday. And on the website, we publish, JUFJ publishes some examples of people who have written testimony during that session. So you can take a look and, there are wonderful ideas out there. If you're not sure what a testimony looks like, go out there. If you're interested in the bill on immigration or on housing, there's Anna Levy. She's out there. She's on our call tonight, and she has written testimony. So you can look at what people filed last year. The bills are not exactly the same, but you can get a strong sense of what testimony looks like. So some oral testimony tips are out there. As Eliana mentioned, we may not be giving oral testimony. I have had the opportunity a few times over the past few years to give oral testimony, but it just depends on whether or not our partners need extra people to give oral testimony. And last year we couldn't even give it because of COVID. I'm not sure whether it's going to be in person or on Zoom this year. We will see how it goes. So we may not give oral testimony, but the tips are out there. And then all the campaign resources for each one of our major campaigns, such as the Time to Care Act, which was our big campaign last year, such as all of the housing bills that we work on, the immigration bills, they're all out there, and it talks to you about what we are doing with our partners for that campaign. So now I will turn it over to Eliana.
So we have found that oftentimes the most complicated part of writing testimony isn't actually writing testimony, it's submitting it. And I want to say really clearly, and I will probably say this multiple times, we do not want the technical aspects of this process to be a barrier. So please, please, please never hesitate to reach out for support. And we have videos going over each part of the submission process that you can refer back to that will help you every step along the way. So broadly speaking, the testimony submission process is 2 parts. Submitting your testimony first to JUFJ and then the General Assembly. And we're going to look at both steps today. And as you can see on the slide, you'll need 2 versions of your testimony, a Google Doc and a PDF. And again, staff testimony mentors are available excuse me, to help you with each part of that submission process. So the first part of this process is submitting your testimony to JUFJ. And as Carol said, JUFJ staff is not editing testimony this year. So when you submit your testimony to us, it'll be a finished draft. And this is really, really important because it lets us collect accurate information about how many pieces of testimony JUFJers are submitting, which we can communicate to legislators so they can know our collective power, and to partners so they know that we are really supporting them in this work. It is also really helpful for letting us know where we need to focus our efforts on recruiting testifiers. right? If we know that only 3 people have submitted testimony to JUFJ on our immigration bill, we will spend time like recruiting more people to give testimony on that bill. So submitting your testimony to JUFJ is really, really important. And I am going to show you what that submission page looks like. And all of these links will be available to you, and there are video guides to each of these pieces. So don't feel like you need to memorize and capture everything that Carol and I are saying or every link in the chat. It will come to you in many different ways. So once you hit the submit testimony to JUFJ, thanks, Anna, the video guides are excellent, thank you. You will have space to put in your contact information, your name and your email, the bill number, if you know it. If you don't, that's okay. Staff will follow up and make sure that you have it to submit on your testimony. And then a link to your Google Doc with your testimony. And again, there's a video guide specifically on how to pull that Google Doc link. And this is really, really helpful for us as organizers. There's also a space to tell us which issue area your testimony is on, whether that's paid family medical leave, transforming public safety, renters' rights, court and prison reform, or immigrant rights. And last but certainly not least, testimony is really valuable in a lot of different ways. Of course, one of the ways it's important is when it's submitted to our legislators and they read it and get to hear from our stories and see the sort of collective weight that's pushing for the passage of a bill. But it's also really valuable in other ways. It can inspire other JUFJers to write testimony. It can be something that we are lifting up on social media or as a blog post. You can see on my screen, there are lots of different ways that testimony can be used. And we want to make sure that we are using your testimony in ways that you are comfortable with, that you have consented to, or if you just want your testimony to go to the legislature, that is beyond fine, and you can let us know right there. You'll also see there's a space for any questions or comments from staff. So if, as you're submitting testimony to JUFJ, there's a question that's coming up for you, something that you want to make sure that staff knows, you can flag it for us there. Great, so that is part 1 of submitting it to JUFJ. Then there's part 2 of submitting it to the General Assembly. This is in the form of a PDF, not a Google Doc. And again, there's a video guide specifically around how to change a Google Doc to a PDF. So in the past, JUFJ staff had completed this step on behalf of JUFJers. We did all of the testimony submission, but we found that it's a lot more powerful when individuals submit their own testimony. So on this slide, you can see a screenshot of what it looked like when JUFJ submitted testimony in the past. Rihanna Lloyd was on staff and submitted testimony for, I think, 10 JUFJers, some of whom are on this call. And you can see that all of it appeared as one block under Rihanna's name. And that is, frankly, much less powerful than when it appears as 10 separate rows on their testimony submission page saying Anita Lampel, Carol Stern, Deborah Band, Heidi, Joe, etc. are all in favor in this bill as individuals. So we want to make sure, right, we spend time and effort and energy on our testimony, and we want to make sure that it's showing up in the most powerful way possible. So that's why we're asking people to submit testimony themselves. And again, plenty of support if you need it on doing that. So a really common, really good question is, what are the deadlines for submitting testimony? And unfortunately, the answer right now is we don't quite know yet. Every year, each committee in the General Assembly releases information about their deadlines per committee. And we don't have the details yet. They haven't released that information. Typically, for the House, testimony is due 2 business days in advance of a hearing. And for the Senate last year, it shifted around. Where it landed by the end of session was that testimony was due between 1 p.m. the business day before the hearing and 10 a.m. the day of the hearing. So that might be what it looks like this year. It might be different. As soon as we have that information, we'll be making it available on our testimony guide and our communication with all of you. So we know that this process has a lot of moving parts. So one of the resources that we as staff will be offering are drop-in optional testimony office hours via Zoom. So on the day that testimony is due to the General Assembly for each bill, myself or Matan, who some of you met at the General Assembly training just before this, will be on Zoom. So if you have any questions, if you want to make sure it was submitted properly, you can just drop on Zoom within that office hours, and staff will be available to help you with whatever sort of that last submission piece is. As I've said a couple of times, there are many, many video resources. We've tried to anticipate what some of the stumbling blocks or questions might be and have video guides on how to do it. Most of them come from JUFJ. A couple of them come from the General Assembly. And we found last year that they were really helpful, and we hope that they'll continue to be a helpful resource. So I want to pause there and see if there are any questions from folks about the testimony submission process or anything else.
So I know basically you want us to write about things that we feel passionate about or resonate with us, but do you ever let people know that there's a need for more testimony about a particular issue?
Absolutely. So I think 2 things are true. We want people to write about things that they care about and the things that they're passionate about. And we want to make sure that we are showing up for our partners. We are helping build collective power to get our bills over the finish line. So I think the starting point from testimony is, what is the issue that you care about? What is the thing that you want to write about? That might be one bill. You might say, hey, I actually feel really good about writing testimony on a bunch of different bills. And we welcome that either way. There might be moments throughout session where we or our partners realize that we need some more testimony. So especially at our Maryland community meetings, which are held regularly throughout session, one of the things that we'll be updating people on is how much testimony we have, and if there's a need for particular testimony on a particular issue. And I'll say again, nobody's obligated to write testimony, right? We encourage you to fill out the testimony interest form and let us know that you're interested, that you're thinking about it. And at the community meetings and in other spaces, if you have capacity to write more testimony, we really welcome that. And in some cases, encourage that, and we'll support you, regardless of what your connection is to a particular issue area. Debbie, did that answer your question?
Yes, thanks.
And let me just add, so that once you get hooked on writing testimony and you get it down, you will write testimony. You will start on one issue. We have 6 or 8 bills. You might wind up writing a piece of testimony on half of them. And then the next year, you might write on all of them. And remember, for each piece of testimony, it's actually 2 pieces, because you file it both in the House and the Senate. So you're filing it twice. So that's the exciting part, is you get double power out of each piece of testimony. But once you get the way of writing it and the feeling of how important it is, and you know you're making a difference, trust me, you can get hooked on writing testimony.
Thanks, Carol. And thank you, Debbie, for that question. As Carol said, this form is really important because it is the way that we know how to contact you about the bill numbers, about the hearing dates, the testimony submission deadlines. And at the same time, this is an interest form. It's not an obligation form. It's not locking you into anything. So even if you are on the fence, if you aren't 100% sure, we really, really encourage you to fill out this form so that way we can follow up and figure out what feels right together. I know when we were doing rounds, a couple of folks named that this is their first year doing testimony, and this might be something that's like new or a stretch. So especially if you're in that boat, we encourage you to fill out the form, especially request a testimony mentor if you'd like that extra layer of support. Because testimony is a really cool, really unique, really powerful way of making your voice heard in Annapolis. So just like for the General Assembly 101 training for those that join, you will be receiving a follow-up email with all of the links that we've shared and more, the presentation slides that you've been looking at, a recording of this training, and again, a copy of this PowerPoint. If when you filled out the testimony interest form, you requested a mentor, you will be connected with one early next week, we're hoping. And if you know somebody that would benefit from this training, somebody that wasn't able to make it tonight, or if you want to sit through it again, please feel free to invite friends, neighbors, colleagues, folks in your congregation to the next offering of this training, which will be on Sunday, January 22nd. We'll also be offering the General Assembly 101 the same evening if you haven't taken that training, or if you have friends you'd like to invite to that. And I'll be pasting those links in the chat now. So we encourage folks to attend hearings, even if you aren't testifying, right? This is a great way to support our issues and get comfortable with the process, especially if you're maybe interested in giving oral testimony. And it's also a really powerful way to show our legislators that we care, that we're watching, that we're paying attention to these bills. And it is likely that hearings will be hybrid this year. We've had meetings with the chief of staff for folks in leadership in the General Assembly. It's not official yet, it's not confirmed, but it is our understanding right now that folks can watch hearings in Annapolis or can watch hearings via live stream. And staff in some capacity will be offering watch parties for hearings, which many of you have joined us in. We also encourage folks to represent JUFJ when you attend in person or virtually. In the follow-up email, you will have the opportunity, if you'd like, you can click on the link to buy a JUFJ t-shirt, or very exciting, for the first time ever this session, we have winter swag. So if you'd like a hoodie or a sweatshirt, you can order that as well. We also have a JUFJ Zoom background. And when we attend hearings, whether that's online, whether that's in person, we're taking photos or screenshots and putting it out on social media so our legislators know that we're watching and we're following the fate of these bills. If you attended the General Assembly 101, these resources might be familiar to you, but we have resources that will help you find your district, as well as resources around local news, ways to stay informed around what's happening in Annapolis. We also encourage everyone who is able to, who would like to support the work of JUFJ and our partners. So these links, again, will be in the follow-up email when you get a copy of our presentation. But if you would like to, we encourage you to support the work of JUFJ, of course, and some of our partners like CASA, which is a real leader in the immigration spaces, Out for Justice, which helps and leads in many ways in court and prison reform and juvenile justice, and a local bail fund. And again, those links will be available in the follow-up email.